This miniature took me over 200 hours to paint. And although I really like how it comes out, is it possible to paint it faster without losing quality? Unsurprisingly, the answer is yes. So today you're gonna learn which methods to use to paint faster, how you might be unknowingly sabotaging yourself by painting in the wrong order, and what you can do to fix it and slash your painting time in half. And I know that this sounds like a huge promise, but by the end, it'll make sense. You see, I truly believe that once you reach a certain quality of painting, the thing that makes you slower or faster is the painting order. But what do I mean by painting order? Typically, when people talk about it, they mean which parts to paint first and which can be painted later. Like, you start with the more hidden parts first, and then paint the easily accessible ones later. And that way, you don't paint over anything that's already done. And this is true, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about how you paint something once you decide to work on that part. There are examples where I picked the right workflow, and a few ones where my painting order kinda screwed me over. The wings being one of them. By the way, the full tutorial series for this miniature is already on Patreon. So if you're wondering how I painted any given part, there will be a link in the description. The most frequent way to paint something is layering. So you can see that I start with a base coat, you can brush it on or airbrush it, doesn't really matter. And once that is painted, I apply some layers on top. And this is a really fast and controlled way to paint the whole thing. Right? Well, no. When we talk about layering, we talk about using many layers with small brightness differences between them. And as you cover less and less with every additional layer, together they form a gradient. In this case, I applied many layers on top of each other and also blended between them with thinner paint consistency. The outcome of that process is really nice. But f***ing hell, my beard turned grey in the meantime. And that's because I selected the wrong painting order. Instead of going from layer 1 to layer X, always glazing in between them, I should have made much bigger jumps in value, or brightness. Because, think about it. Most of the time I spent repainting the same surface over and over again, only to have the previous layers as transitions. So when I say that it would be more efficient to make bigger jumps in value, what the hell does that even mean? Imagine that we are using 7 layers total, 1 being the darkest and 7 being the brightest. On the wings we went from 1 to 7, going one by one and glazing in between. But a more efficient painting order would skip some of those layers. Maybe we paint layer 1, 3 and layer 7. Or maybe just layer 2 and 5, and then fill in the rest. However, you don't want to start with layers that are similar, like 3-4 or 6-7. The point is to create enough contrast before connecting everything. This is something I've done on the front scales near her body. Notice how right after the base coat I made pretty big value jump, meaning big difference in brightness. If the scales here were painted in the same way as her wings, this layer would be much darker. It would also mean I gotta repaint the same spot 7 times over, but like this, I won't have to. And to be fair, I still glazed the transitions to smooth it out a little bit, but as you'll see, this was completely unnecessary. Instead, once you have that bright layer on, you can start connecting it with midtones. This layer is darker than the highlight, but lighter than the base coat. I start by covering the bottom, because the previously applied highlight doesn't really get there. So it'll be like a continuation of the top reflection for the bottom scales. And as I approach the top scales, notice how I go only over the transitions, leaving that previous highlight intact. And already, you see the transitions are getting softer. And the best thing is, you can add even more midtones until you feel like it's smooth enough. Sure, you can glaze a bit here and there, but most of the heavy lifting is done with well-covering midtones. By connecting everything like this, you save metric shit ton of time. You don't have to repaint the same part over and over again, and neither do you have to glaze in between. If I've used this same approach on her wings, I truly believe they would be painted in half the time. But to defend myself here, the wings are not perfectly smooth surface. They have these muscle fibers and wrinkles, so layering and picking them out seemed like a better idea. But looking back, I should have just done it anyway. So far, we talked about making big value jumps and connecting everything with midtones. And as I said, you don't have to repaint everything so much and won't have to spend hours on glazing. But what if you decided to make something brighter or darker later? Well, that's easy. You just paint on top and then connect it again! Keep in mind that the sooner you do it, the more time you save, because you'll have to repaint less. But there is nothing wrong with changing anything later. That means if I wanted to save even more time, I would start by painting the extreme values first and then bridge those colors. Not everyone is comfortable with this approach, or maybe you don't really know how dark or light you want to push it. So it's never gonna be perfect, and it's fine to adjust anything later. The main idea is simple. The sooner you set up the darkest and lightest colors, the quicker you can fill in everything between them. And that saves you even more time. Up until this point, I've only talked about painting the wings and the scales. But I totally skipped how I painted this non-metallic metal helmet or the blade. So if you wanna know how to paint something similar, check out this video next because it'll get you there. And see you there!